Okay, so I've already talked about the different modes of heat transfer in an engine for conduction, convection, and radiation. And now I'm going to talk about the temperature profiles through some components in the engine and how that can impact on the design. So if we look at this temperature profile through from the combustion cylinder into the coolant. So I've got a graph here. This is distance along the x-axis. So this is, say, from the center line of the combustion chamber up to the cylinder wall, through the thickness of the cylinder into the coolant channel. So you can see we've got gas on this side, coolant on this side. And we've got temperature on the y-axis. So and sorry, before I explain the profile, I'll just talk about the areas. So we've got the convective heat flux, the radiative heat flux from the engine, conduction and convection on the other side. Now, so convection is radiation from the gases. And as I said before, radiation can be neglected actually for the vast majority of cases when we're considering this. So I'm going to neglect it for this. So let's look at the temperature profile. So the temperature starts off at the bulk gas temperature, which is the temperature of the products once they've combusted in the engine. And as we get near to the wall, we get that characteristic shape, which is due to the thermal boundary layer, where the temperature of the gas drops to the wall temperature. So this is what this means: the temperature of the wall on the gas side. So that's the temperature there, and that temperature profile is obviously governed by the convection. Then there's a linear temperature profile through the thickness of the cylinder, which is governed by Fourier's law, which gives us the temperature of the wall on the coolant side. And then we've got, again, convection up to the bulk coolant temperature. Okay, so we can see what's going on through here. And you can see that, again, when you're doing this type of analysis, for steady state conditions, and I stress that, for steady state conditions, you can see that the conductive heat flux is equal to the convective heat flux, because all these heat fluxes have got to be the same, otherwise it won't be a steady state. So we can either find the heat transfer considering by doing each step individually. So we can, if we know the gas temperature and the convective heat transfer rate, we can work out the wall temperature and on one side and the wall temperature on the other side, and so on. Otherwise, more often than not, you don't know what the internal temperatures are, and you don't need them. And that's because you can basically replace the thermal conductivity and the convective and radiative heat transfer coefficients with a general term, U, which is the thermal transmittance. So this equation will simplify to this. And the thermal transmissions is obviously a function of the convective and radiative heat transfers and thermal conductivity, and it's defined as this. And you might recognize this. It's similar to it's analogous to resistor theory in circuits. So you can think of each of these coefficients as a resistor in a circuit, and we're working out the total thermal resistance, if I can use that term, of the circuit, which will then allow us to work out the temperatures. So 1 over U, the thermal transmittance, is equal to the sum of all the 1 over the convection and radiative terms. So in our example, this term here would be 0. It would disappear because we're neglecting radiation, plus the sum of the thickness of all your materials divided by the thermal conductivity. So if this cylinder had a liner, for example, of a different material, then we'd need to sum those together to give a total overall thermal transmittance, which you can then fairly simply work out the heat transfer coefficient. Sorry, the heat transfer throughout if you know the inside and outside temperature. And I've got an example on this in the exercise section of this lecture. So, as I said, that was for steady state. But as we know, the temperature within the cylinder isn't steady state. Because you're intaking fresh charge, you're compressing it, you're combusting it, and you're exhausting it, the temperature's changing all the time, and consequently the heat flux can changes continually with time. So you can see that here on this graph. This is the surface heat flux within the cylinder during the intake, compression, the power or the expansion stroke, and the exhaust stroke. And you can see there's a big difference, with the surface heat flux. And you can see, obviously, it's even negative for some parts of the cycle. For example, during the intake, where you're intaking fresh air into the cylinder, and that's around ambient temperature, so around 15, 20, 30 degrees, whereas the coolant's 85 degrees. So you're going to get heat transfer the other way, going from the coolant into the gas. And also at the end of the expansion stroke, when you open the valves and the exhaust gas is going out, it's cold, and you might get heat transfer going the other way. But and the heat flux lags behind temperature. But the reason I first presented to you a steady state scenario is because it's been found that most of these heat transfer problems can be treated as a quasi steady state approximation, and this is sufficiently accurate for most applications. So what that means, if you don't know what that term quasi steady state means, is what it means is that you know that the temperature is changing with time from crank angle to crank angle, but what you do is you assume at each new crank angle everything is at steady state with the new temperatures. So you assume it's a steady state, work out the heat flux. In the next time step, you change your temperature, assume it's reached steady state, and then so on. Obviously, that is not the case in a real engine, but again, it depends on the level of accuracy. If you want to go into deeper accuracy, you probably need to use computational methods to work out the heat transfer in an engine, but using a quasi-state assumption, which is, as I say, sufficient for most applications, you can do it simply, perhaps with an Excel spreadsheet. But one other thing that's important to know is that the heat flux distribution over the combustion chamber surfaces is also non-uniform. So it won't be the same top to bottom. But again, depending on your level of analysis, that might be an assumption that's suitable for your particular application. So, talked about the temperature distribution effectively in 2 dimensions, or sorry, 1 dimension. But obviously, we have 3D parts, and so we need to perhaps consider the temperature distribution in 3 dimensions. And the reason this is important is because where you have quite high temperature gradients, as can be seen in some of the images at the bottom, so in this piston crown you can see it's hot in the middle, getting cool out towards the side, so there's going to be a temperature difference in this component, and this is half of a valve, so you can see it's obviously hot at the bottom and cool on the top, so you can only, because it's symmetrical, just you've got a line of symmetry here. And where you have fairly large temperature gradients, then because of the thermal expansion of the material, you're going to have inherent stresses in there due to the changes in temperature, and so you need to work out the thermal stress if there is one, because that's important, because that needs to then be added to the mechanical stress. So if we take the example of this piston, there might well be a thermal stress in this component due to the temperature difference, but obviously there's large mechanical stresses on this component. It's being accelerated and decelerated as it moves up and down the piston. So we need to know the thermal stresses to add those mechanical stresses to ensure that it's designed design well, so it can withstand that and won't fail. And also understanding this also allows good design of the coolant system. Okay, so that concludes this lecture. So hopefully you're now able to know a bit more about the different modes of heat transfer that are relevant to internal combustion engines, and you can describe those. You can also use the theory that I've presented to calculate surface temperatures and heat flux for combined modes of heat transfer. And finally, also understand the importance of heat transfer in engine design, and particularly the temperature profiles through the engine. So thanks very much for listening. If you have any comments or queries, then leave them below. Thank you.